Greetings, greetings, family. We are live. Sister Shanice in the house. It is Wednesday. It's your Jammer Day. Another Sister Shanice show. And, I am looking forward. I am so looking forward to the presentation by our guest today, family. And, he's not a stranger to the Sister Shanice show. Dr. Kheftusa Ankhiba is back. It's going to be absolutely fantastic, bombastic. And as I can see that I am freezing and I don't want to lose you altogether, let me bring our guests to front of house very quickly, because even if I lose connection, once he's front of house, the show can still continue. So family, as you come through the door, please let everybody know that we are live. Yes, some of you might be thinking, hang on, you're on an hour earlier. And that's because the British summertime clocks has kicked in the UK. And so we are now 1 hour ahead in the UK. So an extra hour ahead of the rest of the world. But we've got Dr. Kheftusa in the house. Greetings. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, my beloved sister. I'm very good.
Oh, fantastic. It's great to have you back in the house on the Sister Shanice Show channel, because every time you come, you just drop some wonderful, massive pieces of knowledge for us to take away. And that's what this show is all about. It's about each one teaching one, bringing, the research and the knowledge that you've acquired and all my other guests have acquired, and sharing it with the African family, sharing it with the Sister Shanice Show audience. And so, we thank you so much for that, Dr. Kheftusa. And how have you been since the last time we saw you? I mean, have there been any special events? Has there been anything happening? Have you got anything exciting that's coming up? You know what? Let me put you front of house so that you can speak to my audience for 2 minutes.
No problem. Yeah, so I've been very well. I've been having events. I had Sister Barquette talking about the Black Mother wound last Saturday. As you know, I'm planning a book. I'm in the final stages of that, and hopefully I will get to present something on my book, which is called Heru Rising and the Light of the Shepsu. Also, I'm thinking about some other programs which might be quite exciting to everybody. So I've got a lot planned, and I'm definitely looking forward to this particular presentation, because I've had to really think about how I present this. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of presenting something in such a way that it moves people, but doesn't move people in any form of grief or anything of that nature. So we really have to go into this carefully and with the love and sincerity of our people. But I'll leave my introduction to when I actually start.
Okay, let me add myself back to the stream. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the topics that, is very painful indeed, isn't it? Because it goes to the heart of the suffering that our ancestors went through. And, no one likes to be taken back to the place of pain, but you've said and you've convinced me that we have to go back there, because therein lies our healing. Therein lies, what we need in order to take us forward. And we sure do need to move forward as a people. So we have to go there, family. Also, Dr. Kheftusa is telling me, and I've got every confidence.
That was a disclaimer,
Do you hear that laugh, family? Well, let's welcome our audience as they come through the door. Welcome. Brother Kwame, welcome. He's saying Hotep family. Zachary's in the house. B1, Black First Frequency, all the way from Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, Zachary. Sister Afri Jamo is in the house, all the way from Ghana. Welcome, as always, a pleasure to have you all in the house. Gebra is in the house. I know Brother Gebra was watching, was listening to my radio show earlier today. For those of you who don't know, I actually have a radio show on galaxyafiwi.net every Wednesday morning. And wow, what a discussion and the conversation we were having today. We were in the Marmar University with Brother Marmar. He is just phenomenal. And the callers and the quality of the callers that I had calling in today, family, you know what? I think I might even have to do a separate show where I just share some of the teaching and the learning and the education and the knowledge that we share on our radio show. So rise up, brother Gebra. Thanks for messaging in, on the show earlier today as well. We've got Tianja in the house saying greetings, family. And Tiandra is watching us from the island country of Bermuda. We've got Bermuda in the house. Woo, woo, woo. And she says, I know we are in for a fantastic conversation. Absolutely. As we've experienced before with brother Ankhiba. Yes, and Sister Shanice, thanks for adding me there. Afrijama, always a pleasure. Sister Lily, good to see you in the house tonight as well. So those of you who are wondering, how can I, get a message in the chat? You just have to log on via your YouTube channel and then you'll be able to message us live. We have Go Travel Abroad in the house. Say Hotep, B1 family, Wisdom Wednesday. Hotep, Go Travel Abroad, Sister Baguette, enough love out to you and the entire family. So, without further ado, family, we are in for a treat tonight. We have, as you can see, live and direct, our very own Dr. Kheftusa Ankhiba Ankh Ta'al. And he is a historian, Pan-Africanist, and cultural scientist. And the topic that we're going to be discussing tonight, as I've said to you and as I've warned you, family, is a very sensitive one. It's about buck breaking. Wow, wow, wow. Dr. Kheftusa, over to you.
Okay, people. So I want to let you know right from the beginning, this is about buck breaking, but this is the introduction to it. So this lecture today is to ease us into what is a very sensitive subject. And I have to say, I've been doing a lot of work looking at the system of enslavement or the Martha. And I have to say, at times, tears do roll down my eyes when I consider what has happened to us as a people. And I was reflecting on my youth. When I was young, I was an angry young man at times. And I think, I know part of that anger was an unknown anger. Why am I so angry? But deep down in the subconscious of the African mind is a genetic memory that holds the keys to everything that has happened in our family lines. So if we believe that we can repress it, we are sadly mistaken. The anger that you often see in African people globally is part of the residue and retention of what occurred to us. So I want you to know that this is seeded in our very genealogy. And that is why we have to clean it up. And before I start, I want to say something to us. I want you to think about what happens to a person from an African perspective who dies in torment and anguish. They don't just die. That energy that they died with continues and it resurfaces. And that is why sometimes we have to clean up duppy, meaning that sometimes we have to clean up the anger, the frustration, the hurt, and the pain of our ancestors. Yeah, you love Imhotep. You love Hatshepsut. Yeah, you love Tahutimesh the first and third. You raise up those people, but do you remember that brother and sister who made it through those so-called slave plantations so that we could be here today? So it is actually our job and our role to lift up those who died in the pain of enslavement. So as Sister Shanice says, they can rise up, rise up, rise up. And so that when they come back to the physical plane, they won't be carrying the hurt and the pain that occurred in previous lifetimes. So as an African, we do this work not because it's pleasurable, but because we have to. And that is what I'm going to be presenting you today, my people.
Wow, what an introduction. And so, our genetics, we inherit that from our ancestors, we know that. But, I've never really gone to the place where I thought of, at the point of their death, the anguish, as you described, that they would have died with, on the plantations, or had they been victims of, a particular bit of cruelty, how, that trauma may potentially manifest itself when we reincarnate, if we come back again. And some of us are coming back with that trauma and with that anguish and that anger that we left behind when we died. That's a really powerful and deep thought that I don't think most of us, give much attention to or give much thought to. And so, that suggests to me that there needs to be some sort of, let's just say, a cleansing, a purification, some kind of spiritual work that maybe needs doing for the deceased that died in that tragic way. Wow.
Yes,
Well, we're all ears. We're all ears. And so, to those of you who are just coming through the door, we are ready to start. Our guest has already done an opening introduction, and I think we're on for a spiritual journey tonight based on that introduction. We're going to be going back to go forward, and so rise up to everyone in the chat. Our sister Go Travel Abroad is saying facts, epigenetic trauma. Yeah, welcome Kimani, welcome, unapologetic mystic, welcome Seku, welcome Anna, we welcome each and every one of you, welcome Brother Norman as well. So there's another video playing along with the podcast, is there? There should not be. Can anyone else hear another video? Let me know. Okay, so yes, Brother Gabriel, we're going to Sankofa. We're going to go back in order to go forward. Yes, thank you, Salu, and good to know that you love the king. Okay, my brother, let me hand over to you. Do you want me to click on the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, and family, let me know if you can hear another video or anything in the background, okay? I'm going to go on mute in case it's the hissing that I'm hearing from my computer.
So, welcome. You found yourself in a peaceful place, and we wish for you blessings without number. And what I intend to do today is to walk through some of our history and for us to reconnect with our ancestry. And so I won't waste any time because I got a lot to get through. So one of the things that I was thinking about, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. I remember the first time that I heard her speak in person at the First World Alliance in Harlem, New York. And I was absolutely enamored of this sister in terms of her intellect and her understanding. And one of the things that she talked about was that life was like a chessboard. And she taught us that in the game of chess, historically, the black man and the black woman had been checkmated, that we had been defeated on the battlefield. And because of that, we were paying the consequences. And so it's important to always acknowledge the truth, whether we like it or not. So I want to say to you today, if you find yourself wanting to say but, or this is an excuse, be patient and sit in this space. Breathe deeply and don't make comparisons. Allow the words to permeate and penetrate your consciousness so we can begin the process of healing. This is about healing, not sensationalism, healing. Otherwise, you will start to provide comparisons before the lecture even finishes. I have never met an African man that is not deeply wounded by our status in the world. And what I want to say to all of us, that often we cover that with bravado. So it's important that we understand that many of us are in pain. Now, we talk about reparations, but you'll never get reparations without facing the issues related to enslavement. If you don't understand the issues, firstly, how can you repair something if you don't understand what happened? You can't repair unless you know what happened. Secondly, if you want to make appeals to other people or even to your own people, you got to know what happened. We will never heal our families or mend our relationships or be physically and mentally or spiritually well until we do this work, nor will we find peace. You will not find peace by running away from the dark corners that exist in your mind. You must bring the light and enlightenment in order to free yourself from the mental, spiritual, physical enslavement. Why? Because enslavement is the reason why Black lives don't matter in the world. So this lecture today, we're not going all the way back into so-called history. We're going to fuse the contemporary with the past as our introduction to this subject. Plantation policing, people. Look, if you've studied history, then you will know that during the period of enslavement, if Black people were offered the plantation, what would happen? Somebody Caucasian would ask them, "Where are you going?" They would stop them and question them. Now, it's very interesting then that an official report accuses the police in the UK of the widespread abuse of their power to strip search children. And in that instant, Black children are 11 times more likely than their white peers to be selected by officers for the ordeal. Now, some of you, oh, well, we don't need to talk about enslavement. But that statistic in itself takes you back to the very nature of enslavement. The report says Black children are overrepresented in strip searches by police between 2018 and 2022. But you want to avoid this issue. Often the strip search is about power and humiliation. So when you look at contemporary Black males or Black females, especially Black males, being strip searched, stopped on the streets or strip searched in the police cells, are you trying to tell me that enslavement is over? It is not over. It is not over structurally, culturally, but it's also not over in your mind. And that is why you run from this discussion and this situation. So what are we going to do? My premise is that the systematic distortion of African masculinity occurred during our enslavement. Our masculinity has been so distorted, we sometimes don't even know what it means to be an African man. We're not clear, because remember, when something bad happens to you, I said it is seeded into your genealogy, into your very nature. And those negative things can be triggered by particular things. So that's why we talk about, I was triggered. But this lecture will provide a brief introduction regarding the system of enslavement. Second, it will outline the impact that enslavement has had on African people. You can't talk about buck breaking and take the African man separately away from the African woman and African children. Buck breaking occurs within the context of the Black people and the so-called Black family. The lecture will demonstrate how the system of enslavement never ended. It did not end. And if you don't like it, so it go. So it go. It will highlight our failure to properly assess the damage done. And you know I always say this. If it ended, look by your name. Look by your surname. Look by your name. That tells you it didn't end. It's still here. So let's get deep into this. Let's take a deep dive into who we are. Now, the first thing we have to do, we must have a pledge of remembrance. We forever pledge that we, the hallowed sons and daughters of Africa, will never forget or speak of hollow forgiveness for the sins perpetrated against our fathers and mothers, who in ancient times brought the light of civilization into the world. Yes, my people, we will never forget. It doesn't matter what you say, what argument you bring, we will never forget, one, what happened in the Ma'afa, but we will also never forget that we are the mothers and fathers of history and that we will rise again. But we cannot rise until we begin to deal with our sickness and illnesses. And we will forever uplift the spirit and tenacity of our people that lived through the darkest of nights so we could be the answers to their prayers. Oh, my brothers and sisters, I am, you are the answers to our ancestors' prayers. So when I wrote that, I wanted to go deep into my spirit and find the words to say to you, we will never forget those who came before us, and we will uplift them. We will reconstruct their names, their language, their spirit, and we will change history. We are going to make history by having a pledge of remembrance from this day forth. We will give our lives to the upliftment of our ancestors. So it's important then, my people, to understand that we never came easy to the Western Hemisphere. We fought in Africa. We fought on the ships. We jumped off of the ships. We killed the oppressors. We fought when we got to the Americas. And guess what? We're still fighting now. And we're winning because none of us were supposed to have the knowledge that we have. We're winning, people. So resistance marks the whole endeavor from initial raid to sail abroad. For example, Queen Nzinga of the Angolan state of Matamba fought fiercely for approximately 30 years against the Portuguese. So when you hear people, sometimes black people, oh, the Africans sold us into enslavement, give me the names. Give us the names. Then give us the complete context of what really happened. But that's another subject. Don't just come out of your mouth and say, we sold each other. You can't even name the names of the people. And remember that in any major socio-historical political event, there will always be collaborators. Always. So, the destruction. If you haven't read this book, you better read it. According to Dr. John Henrik Clarke, the greatest destroyer of African culture, the greatest exploiter of the African was the plantation system of the New World. Of all slave systems in the world, no other dehumanized the slave more than that started by Europeans in the 15th century. Yeah, we know the word slave comes from the word Slav. Another story for another time. But Dr. Clarke is telling you that there was no system that has any comparison to what happened to us. I was listening to Sir Hilary Beckles today, and he talked about the so-called enslavement period as a form of genocide. A form of genocide. Don't play with this subject, black people. Don't play with your ancestors. Now, let's look. Buck. What is a buck? You know, you go to America, them say $5, $10, $50. According to some people, they say it's a trading term because when they went there, they killed a buck, they take 5 of them and sell them, innit? So that's how you get $5, $10. So them say. So what is a buck? The male of some horned animals, especially the fallow deer, roe deer, reindeer, and antelopes. Typically, now this is from the dictionary, typically a high-spirited young man. So a high-spirited young man is referred to as a buck, an animal. Yeah, because a high-spirited young black man is seen as a threat and a problem. But the word buck is also a contemptuous term for a black man. You're a buck. Pick up on that energy, buck. A buck, an animal to be controlled, hunted, or killed. So when we hear things like $5, we're talking about a commodity to be brought and sold. So when you hear the term buck breaking, take it serious, people. The dehumanization of Africans, the man becomes a buck. And what do you do with bucks? You kill them and you consume them. What is the truth then? Look at Brother Minister Malcolm, one of the greatest African warriors that ever lived in the annals of time. The truth is that I, like most African men within the global context, have had my manhood questioned, indirectly or directly tested or ridiculed. Yeah, people have questioned, you a man? You see, people don't understand that when you say to an African man, are you a man? Or you tell him he's not a man, that's not a light thing you just did. You don't understand the pain. But let's see who has tested and ridiculed the African man. The African woman has claimed you're not a man. African men have told each other you're not a man. The broader society questions you on a daily basis regarding your so-called manhood. You haven't got money. You can't take care of your family. You don't have the economic resources, so therefore you're not a man. Oh, my sisters and brothers, how many black men have been cut low by these words? You're not a provider. You don't have the economic capacity to take care of me. Well, why not? But be careful now. Remember what I said. Don't say he's making an excuse. Don't say but. Let's understand why. Black men, old and young alike, are being broken daily. And this has been going on for centuries. We are constant targets. Constant. If you talk to most black men and they've been honest, they will tell you on the streets of London, New York, Manchester, Leicester, Birmingham, we are in constant danger, whether you like it or not. But of course, we can't show that. We can't show that. We got to pretend that it's all good. Let's look at the truth again. And in the quiet corners of their minds, your men, that's your fathers, your brothers, your sons, commit physical, mental, cultural, and sexual suicide due to slights and real issues. If I was to even stop to give you a litany of things that have been said to me by people that look like me, brothers, sisters, cousins, oh, it would be rough. And these statements, they come around economic issues, but they also reflect a lack of care and neglect. I heard a brother talk about a poem who, the essence of that poem was, who loves the black man unconditionally? He said that if the black man has nothing to give, then he's not loved. And when you walk the streets in the Western Hemisphere, you see many a brother homeless, lost, and humiliated. And so I say, I have personally seen African men broken by the words and deeds of others. But I know some of you are going to say, but they do it to us. We're fully aware of that, but we want to look at the context. And remember, hurt people hurt people. When you're hurt and you have no knowledge of who you are, you become a destroyer to the people around you. So the destroyers are not merely black men. The destroyers are also black women. Because we were taught to destroy and dethrone each other. I told you this was not for the faint-hearted. We are afraid to face the truth. And so we are still bound to the enslaved paradigm. You see, I won't say the person. I listened to a lecture today, and the professor was talking about the enslavement of African women and the sexual exploitation of them in the Caribbean, but he never mentioned the sexual exploitation of the African man. And we're not going into that today. I want to lay the basis of why this is important. Because if you have no foundation, then it just becomes an excuse to have a gory and horrible conversation. We're not here for that. We are here to uplift us and to remember those who lived through what the majority of us could never live through. And that's why I'm doing this. So, enslavement. The historical dimensions and impact of enslavement on the African world has barely begun to be properly calculated, according to Dr. Maulana Karenga. He says it is clear from all historical evidence the massive European enslavement and its accompanying violence was one of the most catastrophic events in the history of mankind. Now, if, as I say, this issue has not been properly dissected, then how could you be calling for reparations if you don't even know what happened? If this was one of the most catastrophic events in the history of mankind, we're supposed to ignore it and forget it and move on. Oh, well, I don't want to go back into that because I'll have a problem getting to work on Monday. I won't be able to talk to my colleagues. You see, and I'm not getting into this deeply, but hear what I said. The reason Jewish people are respected, whether you like it or not, is because they have gone into the history. They've gone into the archives and they've shown and proved it to the world. And because of that, they are enriching themselves culturally. While you, many of us, I don't want to know. Let me study Imhotep. Let me study anything that makes me feel good. But don't tell me about what happened and how I got to be the way I am. So the implications, the estimated losses of 100 to 250 million Africans for over 400 years. Now, some people say, well, those are just crazy numbers. When I read the book, Enemies, The Clash of Races by Haki Matabuti, who was called Donnelly at that time, why did he say 250 million? And it may have been also from Plan to Planet, which he wrote. Because you've got to look at the devastation that you've got to reap on Africans in order to get the people. You don't just go in there and get the people. You've got to kill people in that village. You've got to destroy people. That you've got to fight a war to capture people. So if you add up how many's on the slave ship, that's not enough. You got to count the wars. You got to count the people who were moved from one place to the next. You got to look at all of that. So the devastation and impact on African civilization, you have not done that piece of work. The loss of family, clan, kingship groups, and cultural integrity, you've not done that work. The first time I went to Ghana when I was a young man, and I had met this beautiful sister who was selling necklaces. I still got one. an older woman, and she loved me. Every time she saw me, she just, oh, my brother. And one day I was telling 3 young brothers about enslavement, because they said, well, how did you all get to America and the UK? And I started telling them, Ghanaians, the brothers started to cry. And the sister got up and walked away. She said she couldn't deal with it. There are many of our people who don't know this story. So the loss of family, clan, kingship groups, and cultural integrity. You don't know your culture. You don't know where you came from. And you're not bothered? I'm bothered. I had a right to know where my family came from. I had a right. My children had a right to be grounded in the culture and the kinship groups. So the collective sorrows of African people are beyond any form of articulation. Nothing that I say, and I'm a good speaker, even Sister Shanice will admit that I'm a good speaker, but nothing that I say, no form of articulation could ever convey the sorrow and the pain. But I'm not here for sorrow and pain. I'm here to wake us up to who we are so we can begin to move forward and resurrect our people. So the negative impact on the collective dignity, self-image, and notions of self-worth on the African psyche, you can't calculate them. May I tell you? You can't calculate it. Because whatever look, I've studied enslavement. I've been lecturing on this for many years. But the more I read now is the more I realize I don't know nothing. You think you know. You don't. You watch Roots, now I know it. You watch Sankofa, now I know it. You haven't watched anything. And it's not about watching it so that you give yourself all this pain. It's about understanding it. How does this play out in my current life? How does this impact me today? That's the point. This is not history. History is past, present, and future in the African system. History is a spiral. Imagine a DNA spiral. That's history. There's no such thing as the past in that. Past, present, and future exist on the same plane. But that's my lecture on history. We can no longer hide from the pain of this issue, as it will continue to affect us until we have created the proper healing protocols. Some of you don't want to heal because you like being angry. I want to remove every piece of anger from my consciousness and my spirit. You know why? Because anything that you can do angry, you can do better when you're calm. Anger gives you high blood pressure. Anger took out many of our parents' parents. High blood pressure, hypertension, fear, stress. All right, my people. So the history of enslavement casts a blinding shadow on the collective psyche of Africans throughout the world. And if you're in the African continent, don't say, as the Nigerian brother said to me when I was a young boy, your grandfather was a slave. You don't know your history. Colonization was history on the African continent where they perfected it. They just didn't call it slavery. They said colonization, but it was slavery. Now, here's the thing. What is the most enduring image of the African within the global consciousness? It is of a so-called slave. If the word slave comes up, everybody sees an African. That is how they see us, my people, and we are going to change that. We are a generation that are going to burst that bubble. We're going to rip it up from its roots, its rotten roots, and we're going to burn it on the fire, the spiritual fire, so we can be born again like the Bennu bird or the phoenix. Let's talk it. So the pleasure principle. Oh, you love carnival. Don't ever talk about carnival to black people. What's the history of carnival? The grinding and shaking and all that stuff. Where's it come from? Go on, I know you're going to say it's Africa. When you go and you look at African dances, you got to understand there are things as secular dances, there are ritualistic dances. It's not just a dance. But where does this carnival come from? We are caught in the pleasure principle as a people. We like pleasure. Nothing wrong with it, you know. But when you overindulge in pleasure and you stop thinking, you're going to have our problem. Ask our young people. Where are our museums, our shrines that venerate those that were lost? Name me one museum that any African has in the world that is dedicated to the upliftment of our ancestors. Not just we were slaves and in chains, but talks about the revolutions, right? Talks about the Haitian Revolution, talks about Taki, talks about Nani, talks about our fight in Brazil. Where are our healing rituals and annual celebrations to uplift our ancestors? Now, you go to Carnival every year. But if somebody said to you, let's have a ritual, let's design a ritual and spiritual healing ceremony, oh, we haven't got time to do that. But we can bump and grind. And don't get me wrong, I love dancing, and when I was young, I raved like nobody business. I was in it to win it, trust me. But now I'm a man, or becoming a man. So we have to look at what we do. You have more carnivals and serious celebrations and rituals dedicated to our forefathers. Yeah, I said it. Forefathers and mothers. We are the consummate consumers of pleasure. We have a powerful commitment to historical amnesia. I was talking to someone the other day, and I realized that people want to forget. Why should we remember? Why should I reflect on that? It makes me feel hurt. You know what's more hurtful? Your current behavior patterns that are grounded on principles that were taught in enslavement. You know what was more hurtful? When young people were told by their parents to go and get the belt, a reflection of what the slave masters did. Go and get the belt, and you're going for the belt. You're scared. You're scared to death. You got some big thick belt, and if you when you take the lick, if you cry, oh, you're bad. The hand raise up, you know. If you don't cry, oh, you're not gonna cry. You see, black people laugh about that in the Caribbean, but you better understand that's right out of slave culture. That's plantation culture. That's plantation culture. When you study the history of Africa, there is no real Africa before we got invaded. We didn't beat our children like that. You are doing the work of the slave master because you can't remember where it came from. So, resurrection. We will never rescue and reconstruct our history and our identity until we free ourselves from the reductionist and narrow accounts of enslavement written by the descendants of the people that enslaved us. See, you are all comfortable. You don't mind that the people that enslaved you, the descendants of the people that enslaved you, write more books on enslavement than you do. They write the books, they set the narrative, a distorted one. And then you hear black people, yes, we enslaved each other. That's the level of your sophistication because you got told that. You didn't do any research. How many Africans in the continent left the continent, came to the Americas and saw what was going on? Come on, people, wake up. You got to write your own books. You got to construct your own narrative. Nothing must obscure the truth of our story, even your fear. You're afraid to deal with this. The first time I went to Elmina, and I came back, I remember somebody said to me, I can't look at those pictures because then I'm going to be angry and I won't be able to go to work on Monday. Because you can't face The fact that the people who you think are your friends were the descendants of people that enslaved you. Now, why is that important? What's important is that those people, in their images that they have in their mind, often reflect the images that were created within the culture. So when they see you, do they see you as equal? So what's the hidden history? There were three people. This is from Malcolm X on Afro-American history. One of the first Afrocentric books I bought. I still got the book, man. There were three people involved in the crime that was committed against us: the slave trader, a slave master, but you never read in history the part played by the slave maker. See? Slave master, so-called slave trader. But what about the slave maker? Do you know that there are people that break horses? That there are people that domesticate, they would turn a wild so-called animal into a domesticated animal. They break that animal. They learn the science of breeding. Okay, remember that what you call dogs were once wolves. How many breeds of dogs are there in the world? Because somebody used the science of breeding to create specific types of dogs. They were wolves. You better start understanding this. Genetic manipulation, the breaking of people, the people that have the so-called negative intelligence designed to break people down. The slave maker used to take a pregnant woman, a black woman, and make her watch as her man would be tortured and put to death. All this grief and fear that they felt would go right into the black baby that was yet to be born. This is Malcolm talking in the 60s. Malcolm was talking epigenetics before you even knew the word. But you never listened to Malcolm, because that's not something that makes me feel good. It's not supposed to make you feel good, but it's supposed to wake you up to what is going on in your own mind and your psyche. You are still sleeping. You're sleeping, and you're happy to be asleep. You don't like people who bring the truth. It doesn't pay to be a truth teller in the black community. Oh, you know how many times I heard people say to me, "Oh, brother, you're just too deep. You go too deep for me. Why can't we just talk about something else, brother?" Like what? What do you want to talk about? Our failure to address the ongoing impact of enslavement represents our continued presence within the enslaved paradigm. You haven't got your eye open. Your eye is closed. You're sleeping. You're buried in a shallow grave. I don't want to start talking masonry because some of you get shook. So, one of the key things was the manipulation of the mother principle. I did a recent lecture where I was looking at Windrush, and I was asking people, why did so many black women become nurses when they came to this country? Why did they? You got to remember that Europeans said that the African woman, the African man were the lowest of the low. And yet you wet nursed your children on the breast of African women and kept her from feeding our own children. Just like those whose mother was a nurse, and the mother's going out at night, leaving her children, leaving her family to take care of others, just like what happened to you in enslavement. The African woman wasn't free to love us, and we weren't free to love each other. And that's why some of you can't love each other right now. I love my children. I love my children. Yeah, you love your children. But what about loving the man who helped you make the children so you could have a family? That would be safer. But I know I'm going too deep, so let me get back. The manipulation of the mother principle. The aim was to create social trauma by gathering the Africans and making them witness the physical and psychological breaking of each other. My name is Kwesi. Now you call me Tom. But you didn't just call me Tom. You broke me into accepting the name Tom. That's why we can't give them names up. I'll say it 1,000 times. We will come up with so many different angulations of why. But the original act was to cast fear in the psyche. So now Africans say, well, if I have an African name, I won't get a job. But that's why we need to make more businesses so we could be who we're supposed to be. The aim was to harness the nurturing capacity of the African woman to instill chemically induced fear into the womb and thus into the unborn child, hence to inject fear into the fetus. That's why they say in African culture, if a woman cries while she's pregnant, it's bad luck. What they're talking about is the hormonal impact, the crying, the pain, the fear goes into the child. Come on, people, work it out. That's why when a woman is carrying a child, you should be singing to that child. That child hears everything in that womb. You should be singing. You should be working on that woman's fitness and making sure she's happy so the baby comes out that way. But we lost that science. We lost it. The aim was to encourage the African woman to submit to enslavement and hence strive to protect her sons and daughters and men through the notion of pacification. Remember, the African woman was a warrior, and so was the African man when needed to be. But that's another story. But the point I'm making here is the fear of the mother gets her to tell the husband, calm it down. Tell the son, calm it down. Pacification, to take the warrior out of the male child and the female child. You don't understand what happened to you. You think it's all in the past. It's right now. It's in your genealogy. It's in your mind. It's in your culture. That's why nobody would be concerned about seeing you jump around in carnival. But if you said that you're going to have some rituals to bring back your ancestors and clean it up, I don't think they'd be coming to that to jump around and wind up. Yeah, man, wind up culture. I say, brother, don't hate on it, bro. Nothing wrong with it. All right, so what's the environmental context? On reflection, you will see that the most effective means of breaking the African spirit was to use our love and caring. Look, during that period, we loved each other. We loved each other. So use our love against each other. That is to ignite the survival instincts of the reptilian brain at an individual level in order for the individual to place survival above all. That's why in many of the revolutions during enslavement, you would get individuals who would tell. Because the reptilian brain, the survival, they went into survival mode and thought about themselves. So they would betray what was going on. Secondly, to manipulate the social and collective orientation of the mammalian brain. The brain of a mammal is different. Reptiles are individual, but mammals, they act in a collective way. Look at monkeys. Look how mammals act. They have a social structure. So if you understand the reptilian mammalian brain, now you can use it against the people. Hence, our desire to protect ourselves became a tool in the arsenal of the enslaver's attempt to control us. Meaning that if I have affection for this sister and she has affection for me, that will be used against you. To love in this context was to receive pain. That's why some of you can't say the word love out of your mouth. Because your mother told you, nobody love no man, you know. Your father told you. We are taught not to love each other because love became almost a crime in those plantation scenarios, literally. literally. Essentially, the animal portion of our brains were used in conjunction with the imperfections of the human brain to make us into chattel. So, in other words, it is understanding that within you is a reptile, a mammal, and a human, and it goes beyond that, but that's not my subject. So, what you do is you manipulate those aspects. Say when someone has a dog and people train that dog, what do they use? They use the pleasure and pain principle. Oh, you see, all of that training, all of that creating these different dogs was part of what the slave maker did. The manipulation of your consciousness and your psyche. Now, you have to laugh at this one, right? But it's not funny. The slave maker, essentially the system of enslavement, used torture, violence, and sociological and cultural means to launch a generational and historical assault against Africans. I have been conscious for years. My adult life, I've been conscious. And I've been hearing black people say, Jesus wasn't white. Jesus wasn't white. You walk into their places of worship, they still got the white Jesus. I remember one time, two Jehovah's Witnesses used to come around my house and I used to talk to them because, you know, me. And once one sister used to come and talk, and I said to him one day, a black woman, a white woman, I said, well, Jesus wasn't white. The white woman was like, yeah, that's true. The black woman brought her husband the next week to take me out. Oh, I sent that brother home packing. I said, brother, you came to the wrong door nicely. But what is this? So this assault against the African included neurobiological, hormonal, and physiological, along with religious indoctrination that used Judeo-Christian images of the white Jesus to enslave the minds of African people. I'm telling you, people, this is an assault at a chemical, hormonal, physiological, cultural, political, and spiritual level, and even economic. Look at how deep that is. That's why you can't get it out of your mind. Many of us say we're African, you're still Christians. And when I say Christianity, I mean Christianity is as taught by Europeans. I said it. And in this, they were partially successful. Always remember, whatever I say, they never succeeded into making us slaves. They didn't sleep good at night. They were afraid. And so it got. But how effective is it, my people, given that if we were to count the number of Africans around the world who bow to the white image of Jesus? Oh, what's the description of Jesus in the very book that you have, your own Bible? What does it say about Jesus? It says in Revelations 1:14-15, his hair white as white wool, white as snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined as in a furnace. Which part, that man there? The description does not reflect the picture, but you who claim to be intellectual, you're at university, you got all kind of scholarships, you're smart, you don't even read your own book. And then when somebody comes along and tells you, you say color doesn't matter. If it didn't matter, then why did they change it? This is spiritual warfare at its finest. The optimal period of indoctrination was during our enslavement. Indoctrination happened before this, but during the Ma'afa, that was the optimal period of what? Indoctrination. So when you looked at God and you now began to say that God was the slave master, the slave trader, and the slave maker, oh my, this is God. This is my God. Oh my God. And you're trying to tell me, so, oh, why do we do lectures about male-female relationships? Because you don't know who you're having a relationship with. I won't even go into it. You don't know who you're having a relationship with because your mind is so muddled. Domination and gender. It has been said that many black women subconsciously equate their Lord and Savior as their husband. I went to a Pentecostal church, so I don't know. I've seen people talking in tongues. Sorry, people. I have seen people talking in tongues. I have seen people go into that spirit. And what you have to understand is when they say, I love Jesus, but Jesus has been superimposed on whiteness, who do you love? Who are you loving? You see, some of you don't like this, but you have to be prepared to look at the psychology of this thing. And thus the enslaved were taught to obey their master. Hence, the black man becomes a secondary force that was relegated to an inferior status. He was broken in the minds of African women and children. That's why it is easy for some of you to say, you ain't a man, you ain't nothing, you ain't shit. I didn't say men don't say it, but we're talking about this particular side of it. You see, many people say, I will not bow down in submission. I will not bow down in submission to the black man. Make a point of it, right? I'm not going to be submissive. Think about it, people. The white savior complex and racial power. So what I'm showing you here, if you think that buck breaking is the sadistical sexual acts, then you don't understand what buck breaking is. That's one side of it. I'm dealing with the psycho-cultural, spiritual aspects of how you break down a people. The white savior complex and racial power, that over the course of centuries, the military supremacy of Europeans allowed them to systematically deconstruct the African man's ability to protect his family. You know, sometimes I have to say this. Sometimes I've heard women say, oh, the black man's too, he's too serious about protection. Sometimes they say he's too serious about protection. Then they say, oh, he don't protect none of us. But firstly, you can't protect somebody who doesn't respect you, who doesn't listen to you. Protection's a real thing. Men have a territorial imperative. You got to understand that. But it wasn't safe to protect the women or each other. So what happened here, the African man's ability to protect his family whilst creating a secular and religious model of white male supremacy that still impacts the African psyche. In other words, some of us in our consciousness do not see the African man as the man. That's why you say the man. And Francis Cress Welsing showed us, then if you call somebody else the man, then what are you? That's why they called you a boy. But I won't go there. Hence, the image of the African man became secondary to the power and status of the enslavers, and eventually references to the man became racialized. Hence, the black man was often reduced to the status of a boy in the minds of some of our people. Oh, he's a boy himself, and worthless. He's worthless. He's nothing. That brother. You know what? Other people, if I relate to other people, they respect me more. Other people haven't been through what your people have been through. That's number one. They don't suffer in the way that we've suffered. They don't have the psychological traumas that we have. So maybe the black man doesn't walk up to you and say you got beautiful black skin because he wasn't taught that. But other people will. So a perspective. To speak clearly about buck breaking, we need to place it in a broader context of control and intense psychocultural and physical violence. Secondly, we must also acknowledge how the African woman was impacted by the violent imposition of European or white power. What did it do to our relationships? You see, that's why I don't understand us. Why are we talking about relationships? Because in enslavement, did they teach you to love the black man? Or did they teach you to fear the master? Did they teach you to support us or support the system that was enslaving you? Did they teach you to put more energy into your family or into the system that is enslaving you? There is a energy deficit in the Black community, where often our energy goes to other people except each other. Thirdly, we must ask ourselves, to what extent has the European power paradigm changed? What extent has it changed? Note, most Africans still bow down to white Jesus, even in contradiction to Jesus' description in the book of Revelations. Yeah, I said it. You get on YouTube right now and put in black churches and see what you see. So how can you say that enslavement is over? We're going over something that we all understand. You can't go to seminary school and tell me that you haven't read Revelations and don't see a disjunction between the description and what you got in your church. No, you go with what the majority, because the majority of the people are brainwashed. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said there's the 5, 10, and 85%. The 85% represent the masses of the people who are deaf, dumb, and blind. The 10% represent the bloodsuckers of the poor. The 5% are the poor righteous teachers. You know, the ones who teach you this history and culture that you somehow don't really want to take serious. No one here, but you know how it goes. We're not the most popular of black people, even within our family groups. Here he comes, here she comes with that black stuff. Here we go again, another lecture. Just watch the film, the man. What until? You have to analyze everything. That's what them say. Yeah, we're the poor righteous teachers. But in the end, we will be the winners. We will be the winners. Submission is not an African concept. When I hear black people talking about submission, I submit to my man. Submit to who? Submission is not a part of a relationship. Respect, cooperation. But you see, you get these terms, but you don't know where you get them from. I need a woman to submit to me. For many women are adamant about not submitting to any African man, but engage in acts of psychocultural submission and deference to the image and power paradigms mastered and perfected during the psychological reconditioning on the plantations in America and in Africa. And then you get upset when a brother calls you out on it. You won't listen to him, but you'll listen to other people who don't look like him. Who is your father? Who is your mother? Who is your teacher? However, this also applies to the African man, who is also an active participant in the brainwashing of his people. This goes on daily as broken men and women continue to teach their children what came out of their enslavement. In some respects, we are all guilty of this in some way. So the objective of the lecture is not to say that's them over there. It is for us to reflect and say, to what extent do I do that? To what extent do I find it hard to support black businesses? To what extent am I the type of person that always asks for a squeeze when it's a black business? Give me a discount. Give me this, give me that. You don't ask other people, but it's in your psyche, because you think that when you give to black people, somehow they, as they say in America, somehow they're getting over on you. We got to understand who we really are underneath. So, back to this theme of submission again. The cultural and linguistic submission. Only broken people give their children the names of the people who enslaved and oppressed them. Malcolm said, when we were first brought here, we had a different language. And these names in this language identified the culture that we were brought from. Once our names were taken Our language was taken and our identity was destroyed and our roots were cut off with no history. We became like a stump, something dead. What language do you speak? What's your name? What is your cultural identity? It's not enough to say you're black. What is the culture that you come from? Do you even understand that culture? When you get married, when you have naming ceremonies, all the so-called ritualistic things that you do, how many of them do you do in accordance with African principles? You're cut off from your culture. You have submitted to the cultures of other people. You have submitted to the language and identity profiles given to you by other people. And that is why whenever we talk about African culture, we start talking about cults, voodoo, and all of the things that were programmed into our minds. We are afraid of the reality of who we are. And that is why we attempt to escape from being African. So, questioning the black man's manhood is quite easy. It's not that black men don't need to do better, but I ask you humbly, which other man on the face of the planet has been the father of civilization, but also a group of men that had been genocided? I made up that word. Yeah, it sounded better than genocide. I said genocided. I made that. Which men on the face of this earth have been targeted like the African men? We've listened to Dr. Winters. We've listened to our scholars talk about whenever you go somewhere, if you dig deep enough, you'll find the African. So we don't find the African today in many places around the world because we're being killed off. Why? Because we are too lackadaisical. We don't even know how to defend that. I'm not even talking physically. Let's just deal with defending your culture, defending your identity. You don't even want to do that. Somebody gets up, says, I'm African, you got an issue. Do we believe in or know ourselves? How many of us as African men have felt unloved? How many African men have felt that nobody really cares for them? And when you try to explain that to some sisters, sometimes they ridicule you. You're too soft, you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that. Remember, the same African man that you have a problem with was at one point a boy. What happened to him in his childhood? Who taught him to be a man? So when your words become daggers, you're killing off the man within a man who doesn't even know what a man is. Because our systems, our cultural systems to teach manhood were destroyed. You see? Have you ever met a real African man? What would he look like? How would he act? And if an African man dropped from the sky tomorrow and said, yes, Miss Sister, what happened to you? Some of you would find his African ways too much because you are way too European like the rest of us. Yeah, we say African, but culturally, psychologically, are we really Africans? Are we committed to the way the Africans used to live? So we have to find the self-savior. I told you that my book is called Heru Rising. Heru Rising, the God rising from within you, finding the divine principles within you and bringing it to life. That's why when people say woke, because they know what they're talking about. It was the awakening of the God of Seer, the black divine God who awakens via a knowledge of self and self-knowledge and becomes a divine being in the form of Heru. Heru, the self-savior. How many of us see the African man as a savior? Where is our Heru? What is the state of African manhood? Many of you don't believe in the African man. Even you, African man, you don't believe in you. I start up a new venture. I go to my people. They'll be telling you why you can't do it. Oh, you can't do that. They won't let us do it. Who's they? They're going to stop you, brother. They is a voice in your mind. Do you really believe in the African man? Or is he your cultural, social, and political whipping boy? Is he the easiest way or the easiest person to attack? The facts. Black men were sexually violated by both white men and women. See, the next lecture, I'm going to go into it. But I didn't want to go into it because we have to prepare the way. You have to open the way. In a ritual, they say you open the way before you begin it. You can't just come in and talk that talk. You got to make people understand why it was important. So I bought one of these books. It was known men in the slave trade, black men, were scrutinized physically, groped and prodded, violated as part of the assessment of their commercial value as workers and some of their reproductive capabilities. He was a buck. He was a buck. He was a tool, a object to be used to enrich another group of people. He was abused. And you know, abusers can become a victim of abuse can become an abuser. So when you start saying the black man is this, the black man is that, where is all of that history in Africa before we were conquered? When you abuse somebody, it doesn't mean, you got to understand how the mind works. The mind can fasten on to the activity and replicate the activity, even though it happened to you. So what you're not understanding is that in the situation with the brother who was killed by the police officers who were supposedly black, that's a prime example of buck breaking. You kill what you hate. Whatever your reasoning, you would not have done that to a male from another culture. But you know, if you kill a black man or an African man, the consequences are always less. And that is why you see us being killed all around the world. And we become desensitized to it. We are desensitized to the death and destruction of each other because people have been seeing this for centuries. We hardly bat an eyelid. And that's why when the police attack one of us, we march and we do all of these things. But when we do it to each other, everybody's silent. So part 2 will examine the reality of buck breaking. It won't just go into what was done in terms of the violation of the African man. It will look at how do you, when you mistreat African women in front of African men, what does it do to our psyche? Do we connect or disconnect? When you feel that you can't do something, you're going to disconnect. You're going to move away from the pain. I read a story where a brother had his whole family enslaved. He couldn't take it anymore. He ran and he escaped. And he said he was happy when he came to freedom. But in the back of his mind, he knew that he'd left that woman and that family behind. Then you say, I can't understand how men can leave their children. When you read the books, it tells you that on the slave plantation, the white males had access to every woman. So the black man had to deal with what he was given. See? That is why there's a tension sometimes between how black men feel about black women when they relate to other men. Because deep down in the psyche, there's a pain. I couldn't protect my woman. I couldn't protect my children. I couldn't protect myself. When you see those men with the wine bottle or any kind of drug to make them forget their life. Well, you say they're not thinking about slavery. No, they're thinking about how they can't get a job. They're thinking about why they dropped out of school. They're thinking about why they're not respected and why they hang on street corners outside the bookie. Now look, bookie. They bet on horses. You're betting on something because you're not clear that you can build something for yourself. And so what I want us to say is Anuk Osir. I am Osir. Embrace your unlimited potential. If you don't understand who you are historically, will never be able to deal with this issue. I have to find the God within me. It takes the God within me to do this research and not be bawling on the floor like a baby. Because in this, I'm healing myself. I'm healing. We got to heal people, but we got to do it using spiritual principles. Where is your energy cultivation systems? Where is your meditation? Where is your proper hydration? Where is your proper diet? All of these things are necessary for you to reach higher consciousness and higher levels of understanding, for you to go deep or to receive the revelations from your ancestors. You must be at that frequency. What is your frequency? Oh, I'm sorry. They're going to kick me off now. Marijuana takes down your frequency. Alcohol takes down your frequency. The food you eat takes down your frequency. So you can't awaken the God or Ser that exists within you because you have the wrong frequency. The frequency that we are on is carnal, carnivore. That is why in many situations we end up killing and defeating each other. We who have been given a Setian mindset. So, without any further ado, let us understand the mother. Let the great mother nurture her sons. Sometimes, brothers, it may be just you and Neter, just you and God. If nobody else believes in you, brother, find the God within you. Resurrect that God and become the man that you know you can be. All men, whether father, son, uncle, or brother, need the mother principle, even if they don't know it. I don't care how backward that person is, they need it. And so it calls on us to find the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Shu, which is the masculine from ancient Kemet. Tefnut, which is the feminine. We must bring the mother principle back to life to save our sons and our daughters. The mother, the divine mother, is the way that we will be resurrected. And you see the connection between the child that suckles on the breast of the mother. The breast and the milk is like the culture. It is the sustenance. It is our culture, our spiritual culture, that will bring us back to the divine realignment that allows us to study and understand who we truly are. And then no one will be able to brand us as slaves ever again. I am never, have been, nor will be a slave. I am the son of the original people of the planet, the first civilizations, and I am learning to find the God within me so you can find the God within you, and we can resurrect our people and make our children whole again, make our mothers whole again, make our fathers whole again, make our people love again, make our people smile again, make our people hug again. Just make our people be who they be. Peace. Hetapu. You're muted, sister.
It would help if I wasn't muted so you could hear me. Thank you so much for that very moving presentation. You're right. It didn't go in the direction that I expected it to.
I told you.
Far from it. But, it was a lot for us to think about there. It really, really was, especially when you started, homing in on, the role of the woman, in a lot of this as well, and you talked about the perspective of the woman towards the man as well. A lot for us to think about there, and you reminded us that the father of civilization is now basically the scorn of the world, and even in the eyes of some of the women, because he's been reduced to a position where he's unable to protect the woman, unable to protect the family, maybe unable to provide for the family, the home, the roof over their head, to militarily protect his nations, so the role, the masculine role of the man has really been has been under attack for centuries. It's been under attack for centuries, and today is a continuation, is it not, of that those hundreds of years, even thousands of years of oppression of the black man, because they know how powerful he is. They know the great cities and the great kingdoms that we built. The black man and the black woman, they know, how great we are, and therefore how far we've fallen from. And their job is to keep that knowledge from us, and to continue to try and reduce us to little and next to nothing. So there was lots of conversations going on in the chat as you was presenting, and I'll bring that up. Some are saying, "Where's the part 2 and the part 3?" Already, rise up, and so I'll bring in some of the comments. But first of all, let me just pull some questions out for you. You were reminding us of the extent to which the African man is wounded by their status in society. Now, this is something that isn't often spoken about, and you said that, in your presentation, and alluded to it. It's that secret, it's that, hidden voice in the back of the head of the black boy and the black man. They can see the resentment, they can see how they're perceived by society, they can see their, denigrated status in society. But what we often see is how they react to that. So some of them, they date outside their race, they try and make it, and then they put, the race of another, of a woman from another race on their arm, because, they're running away from themselves and who they are, and they don't want to bring children who look like them into the world. But, this is really deep, and it's a wound and an injury that is there in the hearts and the minds of our young people. Imagine. And that's something that we don't often think about, that deep wound that our children are carrying, because they don't see their fathers maybe having a status in this society. So how do we address this as a community together? And as a family, how do we address this?
Well, my sister, the first thing we have to do is to acknowledge its existence. The new age people, they talk about we need a space for this. But they're right. We need a space. We need a space for this dialogue. If I was in an atmosphere that was not conducive, I couldn't speak this way. You must open the environment to allow men to speak their truth, even if it's wrong. because when the word hits the environment, we then have the opportunity to analyze it, to correct it, to look at it. But what we want to do is shut it down. You see, many mothers don't understand that their sons will not tell them what happened to them. They won't tell you, won't tell your mother how you feel. We were taught in as Jamaicans, we were taught fight, physically fight anybody that troubled us. That's what we were taught. We weren't taught to reflect. We weren't taught critical thinking. We weren't taught about how our brain functions. We weren't taught to go into our history. So the key thing is, many African men cannot articulate. That is why I'm articulating for them. I know many brothers who have come and told me stuff. If I said it on here tonight, it would be trouble, because if you as a woman are not open to that man talking to you, and when he tells you something, you shout him down, he's not going to tell you. Men are very fragile in places, just like women. Remember, there's a yin and a yang to a man, there's a yin and a yang to women. So we have to create the space for us to have this discourse and this dialogue. And we need private sit downs where men and women talk about their stuff, the real stuff. And then we need the healing protocols. We need the meditation. Because you see, remember that when you go back into a trauma, if you go as the child, say you had a trauma when you was 10, when you think about it, you're still 10. But what you have to be able to do is go back and look at that trauma as a refined person who is spiritually awakened, so you can understand, why are you going back? You're going back so you can see where this behavior began. Many, if you remember Jawanda Konjufu, he talked about when the black boy reaches 11, everything changes for him in Western culture. I've lived that. I became a threat. People were afraid of me. We are targeted at a very young age as black boys. And if you haven't got a mother who has a knowledge of self and a deep understanding, she's not going to get it. And if you don't have a father, many of us grew up without fathers at certain points. A father is a powerful, powerful, powerful motivating force. I got the statistics on it, but that's not my thing today. Because what I want to say, until we can get to the point where we recognize, in general terms, that a two-headed family is better than a single parent family, we're not going to get nowhere. But you cannot get to that point until we understand our culture. And understand this, as a little boy, remember, we were breastfed by our mothers, right? And at a certain age, we now have to disconnect from our mother because she's a female, right? A mother will give a little boy a bath. That's not a thing. But when he gets to puberty, the mother has to now disconnect. So when the boy disconnects from the mother and there's no father, you're in trouble. Because now, unlike his sister, he can't have the same relationship with his mom. So it's not just the mother wound, it's the father wound, it's the family wound. And until we have I will say it, the testicular fortitude as men to tell the sisters how we are feeling, what we're going through, we're not going to move forward. Because if you have a woman that will listen and you don't tell her, that's on you. But many a time, sensitivity in black men is seen as a weakness. You are too sensitive. Women say that them like rough man. Really? You want a rough man? You see, we're so confused because enslavement, you got rough men. Don't you want a refined man? Don't you want a thinking man? Don't you want a loving man? Don't you want a cultural man? Don't you want a man that will uplift you and your children? Ask yourself, African woman, what is the ideal man that you have in your mind? And to what extent do you move towards that man? Or do you move towards men that you know is never really going to work because we've been brainwashed? The same goes for the brother. The science of mating. The science of mating is a lost science within the African community. The science of rearing boys. That's why I want to do something to help Black boys, but I'm going to need more support from people. So I see someone says, which woman says she wants a rough man? I've heard women say it. I've heard women say it, that they want a rough man. What did MC Light say? Gotta get a roughneck. I want a roughneck N. Oh, my people. See, one of the things that we have to do sometimes is just be honest. We know that we live in a upside down culture. Where when we say I want to go left, we really mean right. When we say it's good, we really mean it's bad. And when we say it's bad, we don't know what it is. But the point that I'm making to us is we have to be able to have serious conversations as adult people who are willing to hear a different perspective. That's what we have to do. But we've got to do it from a cultural perspective, and we've got to create a safe space. What do you think of Shahrazad Ali? What do you think of Francis Cress Welsing? What do you think of these people?
Thank you so much for that. Most definitely, we need to be having these conversations, and and to give credit to our greats as well every time. And it's interesting, this idea that most women want a rough man. I don't know.
No, I never said
Is
most
that
women. No, I never said most women. No.
not most? Okay. How many? What percentage?
Some women say,
Oh,
not most.
okay.
Not
I don't
most.
know, because I also think that, we have to be careful about what the media, even through the music, is conveying to us, because most of us know that our music is being controlled. Our music and the creativity of the young people has been hijacked, and that there are those who are in control of the music industry who are being selective in the messages that is put out there. Okay, and so they have an agenda to ruin our family structures and to ruin our communities. And so, there will be a particular message and a narrative that is being pushed by these demons in the music industry, but that's not necessarily a reflection of what women really want. I would suggest that most women want a man just to love them,
Okay.
to take care of them and to be there with them and for them. And remember, as I mentioned this actually on my radio show recently, I remind our men that the woman, the Black woman, the African woman, has always been there for the man through thick and thin. She stood by him during the days of enslavement. She stood by him and tended to his wounds after the whipping. She stood by him after he was being robbed by the so-called exploiters there managing the plantation. She stood by him. She protected the boy children. She protected the girl children. She never abandoned the Black man, never. And the African woman, Black woman, can never abandon the Black man, because the day she does, it's all over for our race, because she is the one who's sustaining the race in terms of bringing the Black babies into the world. If the Black woman stops bringing Black babies into this world, it's all over. And even when she sees or feels abandoned by the Black man, she still doesn't abandon the Black man. She is there for him. So, no, we love our men. We love our black men.
So,
Yeah. What do you say, ladies in the house? Do you agree with that? Do you agree with me on that?
So let's look at what you just said, sister. Let's look at what you just said. See, the first thing is important to listen to what the person's saying. I didn't say all black women want rough men. I never said that. That's not the point.
And I never said you said that. I made the mistake to say you said most.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say here is this. This is what I'm trying to say. In enslavement, not all black women or African women protected the men. That's a fact. They didn't. No more than all black men protected the men. We didn't, because the whole point is, you see, if we get into a thing where we have a reaction to it, we got to see. I'm saying that within the culture that we have now, there is a tendency in some sections to say they want a ragamuffin man. Yeah, I've heard it growing up when I wasn't conscious. I've heard it. I've seen it. So it's not a theory for me. It's a fact. I'm not saying that's what it's about. Well, maybe you moved in different circles, sister. But I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've seen it.
I've heard it said, and I agree with that. But that used to be the talk as well when I was growing up as well. When a ragamuffin man. What does a ragamuffin man? What does that mean? It means a non-conformist. It means a man who's prepared to be a man. It means a man who's prepared to, not go along to get along because that's what society expects of him. Like a rebel. It's like, because we see as women what it takes really for us to make it. And conforming and bowing is, maybe to some not the way. Although to some it may be the way because they just want our men to shut up, keep quiet, hold your head down, go to work every day, don't answer back, and get on to get along. And then there are those who, just want the man to withdraw himself from the system and to set up on his own, and she'll be there with him through the thick and the thin because he's doing it for the family. So it's a complex scenario, but I think it's really good. We had the presentation on relationships. These are sometimes some of the discussions, and even this, where it's great to be able to just bring in, the audience. Yeah, I mean, we've got the audience through the chat, but it's lovely to hear all the voices, isn't it? The voices of the women who have been talked about,
and I think
and the voices.
The other thing, sister, is to always understand the complexity, because you just said what you say a ragamuffin man is. Among male culture, in my days, the teenager, that wasn't a ragamuffin man. So again, the way that women may see a ragamuffin man is not the way when I was growing up. That's not necessarily what it meant. So we've got to understand that there are conversations between men that women don't really hear about. Men know men in a way that women don't know us.
Okay. So what would a ragamuffin man mean to
see how you forgot?
You want to know? You touched on something there now.
Well, I tell you what, I was never called one. I was never a ragamuffin.
Okay.
I was never that.
That was the song, I think we used to sing it.
You see, Sister Shanice, this is a hot topic. May I tell you? It's a hot topic because we have to always remember that we have to be careful with our words, and we also have to remember that we have to allow it to come into the atmosphere so we then can look at it again, because the points that you make are important. That's how you defined it. And that thing about being rebellious, many brothers that I know were rebellious and ended up in jail. Most of the people I grew up with went to jail because they got caught into this rebellion culture that is not necessarily African. So that's another interesting point that you raised, my beloved sister.
Oh no! Now that is another. You've just made a statement there. Oh my gosh! People that isn't necessarily the African spirit. I mean, I'm seeing Bookman Dotty and
Come
even
on.
man like Sam Sharp and Paul Colvin and them man they were true rebels. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And they were
were.
very much African. And then
They
all
were.
the African warriors and kings and queens,
They're
the
African
African
warriors. But the,
on the continent as well. I mean, there were times where we had to
yeah.
rise up that African warrior spirit. You know,
But
did
to
we not?
be an African
I
warrior,
think we need to be more warriors. I think we need to rise up that warrior spirit in us
we do.
today.
We do.
Yeah,
We do.
because
But the point I'm making is that to be an African warrior, you have to know African culture. Because a warrior is not just about warfare. Okay? A warrior, that's only one aspect of being a warrior. And in truth, in African culture, the warrior principle was not the highest principle. The father principle was the highest principle in African culture, not the warrior. We're the warrior when we need to be, but we need to be the father and the nurturer. We need that. And if you look at African societies, that's why they were less warlike.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's bring in some more comments, shall we? Don't just leave it to me, family. We have a bit of time for discussion, so it's absolutely fantastic. We like to have these sorts of conversations. Let's see what Queen S.A. Smith is saying. Used by men. Okay, let's put it up on the screen. What does it say? Used by men and women to describe a good man who takes care of his responsibilities and even helps those who are not his biological children. Who is she referring to? Used by men and women to describe a good man. Is that ragamuffin?
You're not going to drop this ragamuffin thing, is it? Boy, that thing there, sweet, you.
Yeah, you brought it back. You brought it back to me after all these years. Okay. Wow. If the black man has nothing to give, he is not loved. Oh my gosh, that was such a hurtful statement, my brother, Dr. Kheftusa. If the black man has nothing to give, he's not loved. So that's suggesting that we only love the black man for what he has to give, for materialist reasons. Let me get some comments from the females in the chat in response to this. But that really hurt. We've got brothers, we've got sons, we've got our uncles, we've got black men in the family who we love. They may never have given us anything during their life, except the most important thing that they can give, in my opinion, and that's love. The most important, and time, the most important gifts that a black man can give a woman, his family, his community, is his love and his time.
Say that again, sister. Say it again.
The most important things that a black man can give his family, his community, and his nation is his love and his time. You ask a child who is smothered with gifts but never sees the father, which would they prefer? The father who's there at the school meetings, who's there to pick him up, the father who's there to have the conversations together with him as he walks through the park, the father who's there to play with him, the father who's there to advise him during his adolescent years, the father who's there to advise him when he wants to date his first girlfriend, the father who's there giving his love and his time. You can't pay for that. So, the idea that a black man has nothing to give, let me tell every black man, you have your love to give and you have your time to give. And your love and your time is precious. It's precious to us. It really is. Another thing that you spoke about that a lot of us actually run away from is, you mentioned that the Jewish Holocaust, and they tell their story to the world, but we run away from telling our story. And you know, what I actually saw that come to light for me as you were saying that, it dropped in my spirit that it's the Jewish people who tell their story. They tell their story through film, and they tell their story in a way that they get the sympathy of the world. They tell their story in a way that by the time you finish watching the movie that they put together, you're in tears. But we don't necessarily get the same opportunity to tell our story.
Teach it,
Others tell
Teach.
our story, and they tell it in a way that we're always the victims and they're the victors. They tell it in a way where we see the black man on his knees begging.
Teach
that
it.
really awful
Teach
picture.
it.
We don't. It's not
Teach it.
told in a way where we see the black man taking off the heads of those enslavers and burning them in the plantation fields. So we don't see, you know, the warrior spirit and the side of the black man that freed us, what he had to go through to free us from our enslavement. So they tell their stories and they tell it in a way where they get the sympathy of everybody. But our story is being told by our former enslavers, and they even leave some of our people thinking that life was better under their rulership.
That's right. We're better off here. Teach it. You see, beloved sister, there's a couple of things that we got to understand about this conversation. If you remember right from the beginning, I said it was sensitive. So it's sensitive for you, it's sensitive to me. So, for example, the statement I made, a brother made a poem and he talked about men and not having economics and all the rest of it. Now, you could say, well, I disagree with him, but he's telling it from his perspective. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but there's truth in it. So what we have to learn to do is receive it. Receive it. That's why I said we're going to hear the but, you're going to hear the comparisons. But what we have to do, beloved, is let it sink in. Sometimes you hear something, it may be a year from now, it clicks in your head. That's what the person meant. So what we have to do is to be patient with one another, because some of what you said, I may disagree with. Some of what I said, you may disagree with. The point is not that we have to agree with one another over everything, but we do have to know that our conversation is important. And what you said was so important because you're letting us know that we're loved. It's not that every black man's going around saying I've never been loved, but some of them are. And if you look at the suicide rates, beloved, because remember, gang violence is suicide by another name. Suicidal. So what we have to learn to do is to be gentle with one another. Because as I said, men will not speak up if they're ridiculed. I'm not saying anyone's doing that here, but they won't speak up with their thoughts if they don't sense that they can say, even if it's wrong. Sometimes people say stuff to us and we say, oh, that's wrong, but let them say it so they can hear what is in their mind, and so can we. So the beauty of what you said, sister, is that we need to have the dialogue and know that it's a sensitive dialogue, and people on both sides are gonna feel some kind of way about it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So I'm just putting up some of the comments as they're coming in the chat. And Sheriff S is saying, no, nobody don't want a ragamuffin man. Honey said, we're not going for all a while. And then and Dory agreeing, no, sir, no ragamuffin man. Honey's come knock on the door. Okay,
Yes,
okay. We hear you on that. We hear you on that. Let's see what other comments we've got in the chat. I partially had one. The guy died. I did not even go to the funeral. I disliked him since a toddler. Who was that, Norman? So yeah, a bit of a conversation going on in the chat there. Let's put up this one by Sekou Kimani. It says, the man who cares for his family is the African king among us.
Yes, that's in my talk.
He's the king, all right. You may not have a penny. You may not have worked your entire life, but you can be the king of your household because you've got one child in your left hand, another child in your right hand, and your two babies on your knee, and they're just loving you, loving you, loving you. You're just loving them until they're big and grown and flown the nest. And those children, they will then in return know how to give love because they receive so much love. You know, this whole capitalist idea that, you know, we all need I'm not saying that, you know, that should mean that our men don't try and find a job. But if the woman's working, you know, because the doors might open for her, let her work, and the man, you know, reverse the roles. There should be no shame in that, you know, because some of the men can cook better than women. Some of the men can look after children, you know, better than women. You know, when that young boy turns a teenager and the mum say, "Hey, you how you put this?" And no, I'm not taking no notice, but make the father say, "Yo, you know, come here, man. You see how I'm fix up." You know, so we have our roles to play in the family.
Sister Shanice, one of the points that you've just made is that we have to start analyzing the system that we exist in and get an understanding of it. You see? Now, even that thing about ragamuffin, remember, what do the young women say? You see, there's also a generational shift, right? In terms of what they say they want and what you say. So one of the things that we have to be able to do is to understand the different generational shifts and how we change over time, especially when we have knowledge. So this is a beautiful conversation because we have to learn to have a conversation politely and in a caring and loving way. And that's how we demonstrate to our children they can talk to us. They can talk to us because even if they say something that, you know, might be a bit shocking, we get the opportunity to deal with it. So I'm loving this. This is good. The what I'm seeing in the chat is exactly why I did it this way. Because we need to talk and we need to think critically. But more than anything else, I loved what you said, sister. We have to show the love. That's what we got to do. And we got to show that what was done to us failed and we're going to change it. Because for me personally, the women that have loved me most in life are African women. Fact. But you're not going to get that answer from every African man. So we got to be open to this. But this is a beautiful conversation. I'm loving what I'm seeing in the chat.
Yeah, I am too. And we are 3 minutes away from the top of the hour, Dr. Kheftusa. The 2 hours have just run by. To those who may have joined us a bit late today, just to remind you that the clocks have gone forward. British summertime now. We're on a different time zone. And so we're actually starting the show 7 p.m. GMT time, 8 p.m. BST time, British summertime. So do actually make a note of that for next strong or next week, some of you might say. So make sure you don't miss the first hour of the show. Dr. Kheftusa, your presentation has been really, really, you know, insightful, educational, thought-provoking, and you know, it stirred up a lot of very practical conversations, the sort of conversations that we need to be having more of, you know, because the family is the cornerstone to our advancement and development as a nation. It really is. And if we can get the family unit right, then, you know, from the family unit, we can be building family businesses, building communities, and from building communities, we can be building nations.
Yes, ma'am.
And if within the family, you know, the mother and the father are there building the children, then we will be bringing strong, powerful leaders into the world. And that's what it takes. That's why there's such an attack on the family, because they know the power of the African family if we get it right. And, you know, you've talked about so much, you know, in your presentation today, from, you know, our enslavement, you know, and how we came through that, and the feelings and the emotions and the hurts that many of us still carry and we still need to deal with and put to bed today. Otherwise, you know, that trauma, as we said in the chat, will follow us for generations and generations to become. So we agree. We mustn't be fearful of our past. We have to embrace our past. We have to find ways to tell our story as well. And as well as, you know, telling the stories of, you know, how we felt and when we were at our lowest points, to remind our children as well of our former greatness. So we have to Sankofa and, as you say, wake up, wake up, wake up our people. So to all our wonderful men out there, the fathers of civilization, our kings, our great ones, the princes who are going to grow to become kings. We love you. Sister Shanisha loves all of you, and we love you even more if you're showing love to your family and giving your family time as well. There's nothing more precious than love and time. So, in fact, it is that time where we wrap up now. But just to let you know that next strong, or next week, whichever you prefer, we have our brother Ayo Kamasi in the house. Some of you know him as Irritated Genie. So he's going to be with us next strong. And for those of you who said, we need a part 2, part 3, pleased to know that Dr. Kheftusa will be back the following strong as well. So next strong, we will be here. That is the 5th of April with our brother Ayo Kimani. And then on the 12th, we have Dr. Kheftusa, who will be returning for a part 2. And so, yeah, let's have these really important conversations. I want to thank you so, so much, Dr. Kheftusa, as always, for your wonderful presentation, for taking the time to grace the Sister Shanice platform and to speak to our wonderful, wonderful audience. To everyone in the audience, thank you so much. Please do continue the conversations in your families, in your networks, and please like, share, and subscribe. If you're not a subscriber and there's a new subscriber, we welcome you on board. Sister Shanice out of here for now. Dr. Kheftusa, as always, phenomenal. Thank you so much,
my beloved sister. Thank you. Share the love, Black people. Let's do the love thing.
Ashe, one love.